I think in the beginning it was the latter. It was write the book first, but now the marketing has to be a part of it. Every even chapter title needs to be marketable. And if you see that you have this completely unique idea that no one's ever done anything like, you've got to pause.
On the channel today, we're happy to welcome Bryan Cohen. Bryan is an accomplished author with over a decade of experience in Kindle Direct Publishing. Since 2010, Bryan has published more than 40 books and sold more than 150,000 copies. In addition to his writing, Bryan shares his expertise through his podcast, The Sell More Book Show, and by offering his 5-day Author Ad Profit Challenge, a free course that has helped over 25,000 authors learn Amazon advertising. Bryan, thanks so much for taking the time to be here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Cameron. I appreciate it.
Well, let's just jump right into the questions. We have got a few questions for Bryan. He's going to share his insights today with us. So we're just going to jump right in. Bryan, with over 40 published books and more than 150,000 copies sold, your success is undeniable. Could you give us a glimpse into your journey and discuss any key elements that may have contributed to your achievements?
Absolutely. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, I started with blogging and kind of blogging out my interests. This was back in 2008. And I learned a lot about search engine optimization. I learned a lot about keywords during that time, learned a lot about what kind of content people wanted and what ended up getting more traffic that way. And I learned about Kindle Direct Publishing even before it was called KDP. It was something like Amazon Publishing something or other. So that tells you how old I am. But basically, I thought, I've got all this blog content. What if I repurposed it? What if I put it into a book format? And that was the first book I ever published, 1,000 Creative Writing Prompts. And it did really, really well. And I didn't expect to get into publishing in any particular way. I'd never thought about trying to get a traditional publishing deal or anything like that. All I knew is that, hey, I'm putting out content. People seem to be liking it. And having done the research leading into it, having those couple of years of really understanding it, helped me to build that base of, oh, this is what people like, and this is how to find what people like. And once I had those kind of things figured out, I pressed forward, still had a little bit of trial and error in me, but eventually putting out more nonfiction, trying my hand at fiction, found out I was better at nonfiction, which is, hey, it's all good. And then just kept trying to put out more content, did it in different formats like the podcast, Sell More Book Show that you mentioned, did it in different formats like courses, because you can absolutely sell courses in the back of books. And so this really started with understanding what audiences want and then understanding the best medium to deliver them in.
I think that's so important, and it's something maybe a lot of people don't, when they're first getting into it, maybe don't realize how important it is. And I think this really leads into my next question here, which maybe you kind of answered a little bit already, but if you can go into a little more detail. When it comes to your writing process, how much of a role does the advertising and marketing play? And I know you already kind of talked about this a little bit, but is your approach more driven by that marketing strategy, or do you have an idea for the book and you write the book first and then build that marketing strategy behind it?
I think in the beginning it was the latter. It was write the book first, but now the marketing has to be a part of it. Every even chapter title needs to be marketable. You can look at everything that you're going to do through the lens of what are authors already doing, what are content creators already doing out there. And if you see that you have this completely unique idea that no one's ever done anything like, you've got to pause, because there's this feeling that, oh, I'm going to be the first mover. Oh, I'm going to be so unique. But being unique means that readers don't know what to expect from this product. And you need to make sure that you are fulfilling reader expectations at all times. And that's why the advice I've actually given lately to some newer authors is find me 10 books or 10 series that are just like what you plan on writing. And they're like, well, I think there's only 1 or 2 or maybe 0. I'm like, well, then you need to keep working on that idea until it is something that's closer to what readers are already craving. Because yes, some people have had that first big success out of the gate with something totally new, but the percentage was very, very low. They're lucky in a way that they achieved that. If you have that marketing in mind where there have been products like this, and then you start writing that book with your own spin on it, but still within that realm of reader expectations, the marketability will be so much higher once that book is already out.
Couldn't agree more. You're creating that product for an audience that already exists, not trying to find an audience for the product you created, which honestly with any of the print on demand, whether it's Kindle, KDP that you're in, merch on demand, which is where I tend to sell, that's a really unique position that we're in, that we can create products for those audiences that already exist.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to KDP, because I'm not a KDP seller myself, I have one title on there.
Yep.
It's sold a couple times. I don't do too much with it, but I'm really curious to know, do you find that Amazon ads work differently for authors and the books they're selling compared to sellers of any other products on Amazon? And if so, in what ways?
Well, there's some really interesting quirks on the KDP side. Authors who are exclusive to Amazon, they've gone into the KDP Select program. They can actually be paid in a couple of different ways rather than just book sales. They can also be paid by the page. And there's good parts to that. Hey, you can get paid 2 different ways. That's positive. And there's bad parts to that, which is the statistics on the Amazon ad dashboard for authors do not necessarily take into account that you can be paid these 2 different ways. They don't even have ROAS on the Amazon ads dashboard for authors.
Okay.
A COS is a number that is not factoring in, oh, well, this is at 700%. It must be a dud. It's terrible, spending $7 for every dollar you're making. But they could have made 1 million page reads, which would actually work out to very, very profitable. And so the authors have some other things they have to take into account. I think it's actually a little bit simpler and in a very positive way for sellers to be able to actually look at numbers that still probably aren't 100% accurate, but at least they are not having this whole other way that you're getting paid to kind of muck up the works. Also with authors, a lot of authors are selling a book 1 of a series, and they want to sell book 2 and 3 and 4. You're not going to see book 2 and 3 and 4 show up on the statistics for those ads, even though that's the way that readers buy those books. So for sellers who, I'm sure are selling plenty of related products, you don't necessarily expect them to sell in a certain sequence. And so you're not expecting that when it comes to your sales of those products. So the ad dashboard is a little bit easier to interpret. And so I think that sellers can definitely use that to their advantage.
Okay, very interesting. From your perspective, what are some common missteps that you see KDP authors often make when it comes to their advertising, and how could these pitfalls be avoided?
Well, I think authors have really tight margins, and I think that you sell a ebook that's $3.99, you're gonna make $2.75 from that. So you have to think, okay, well, what if I only sell a book every 10 clicks? Well, then those clicks need to be under 28 cents, $2.75 divided by 10, in order to even break even. And I'm sure that it's different on seller side when you're selling something that's priced a lot higher. The margins are a little bit easier to swallow. So what authors don't always do is they don't always account for that. They see Amazon still gives suggested bids that are over $1 for a book that might be a standalone at $3.99. And the authors think, well, if Amazon's suggesting it, then I guess it must be what I should do. But those margins are so tight for authors that you can't necessarily think like that unless you're just trying to brand build and you know you're going to lose money. But I think for a lot of authors, they haven't really reached that point of wanting to brand build. So you really need to think about, what are my margins? What kind of profitability can I get on this? How often am I converting on this? Does it take 40 clicks for someone to buy? If that's the case, there's something in the product listing. There is something in the content. If it's a book, there's something in the sample, the look inside of that book that is sending people away. And so authors really need to think about, how does my product description, how is everything on that product page converting? And then they need to factor that in with, okay, well, if it's converting 1 to 3, maybe I can raise that bid a little bit, but they don't always think of it in those terms. And that's why that ends up being the biggest misstep I see.
So important, that relation between conversion rate and what your cost per click or CPC can be, especially with those lower margin products. It makes a big difference, and kind of in the same boat with merch on demand products that don't tend to have as high a margins. There's a lot of similarities I see between merch and KDP when it comes to that, just those lower margins and taking those factors into consideration. So I'm glad you brought it up. And as a new seller, it's probably not something, especially if you're brand new to ads, it's just not something you've even considered, conversion rates and CPCs and all this other jargon that gets thrown at you right away. So I'm glad you brought that up as something. Just keep in mind your profits and conversion rates and what that relates to when it comes to cost per clicks.
Yeah, this is when the side hustle becomes a real business.
Exactly, yes. So authors, like other sellers, have a lot to manage in their business, I'm sure. And especially as you scale, you add new products to your portfolio, Amazon ads can become pretty overwhelming. Could you share any practical advice on how KDP authors can manage their ad campaigns effectively without it becoming a full-time job?
Absolutely. Well, for the longest time, the prevailing advice was put every ad for one product, for one book, into its own portfolio, rather than them just all being in one kind of catch-all group entirely. Because one of the nice things is you can see, I'll go over to where my royalties are reported for KDP authors is the KDP reports dashboard. I see I made $50. I see this portfolio. Spent $30, I'm good by $20. I'm profitable by $20. But now they are starting to roll out, I haven't seen this on all ad dashboards, but I've seen it on most, a products tab where you can actually see it tied to the Amazon number, the ASIN, of how much that book has spent, which is really, really good if you have done lots of multi-book ads where you've put multiple products into the same ad, because that was really popular for a little while. And this allows you to separate everything out so that you can more easily tell, well, what spent what, because this is one of the biggest challenges with authors or sellers who are adding more products, keeping track of everything as far as profitability is concerned. I have seen authors say, I have totally just broken even on these ads. I spent $300. I've made $300. And they are not able to tell me from a glance, well, what did book 1 do versus book 2? How did book 3 do? And they will actually, once they dive in, see that their one series, very profitable. Spent $100, made the whole $300. And the other one, they spent $200 and made $0. And they don't necessarily separate those out to see that, if I put my time and effort, usually I recommend 80%, the old 80-20 rule, put 80% of the effort into the most profitable product, and you will start to be able to see that scale. But if you keep it all clumped together and you never separate out things to keep them organized, you're going to have trouble figuring out what is actually the thing that should be my flagship product.
I couldn't agree more. It has a lot to do with the structuring of your campaigns too, especially with how Amazon attributes their data, where your search terms you can't attribute to a certain product when you have multiple search terms in there. Just all these little quirks that as you gain experience with Amazon ads, you start seeing that your structuring of your campaigns really plays a big difference in the knowledge you can gain from the data, which that's what you're paying for at the end of the day with Amazon ads, is that data to make decisions off of.
Absolutely.
What do you see as the biggest challenge that authors encounter when using Amazon ads? And you've kind of touched maybe on a few different things, but is there one certain challenge that you see as just the biggest hurdle? And do you have any strategies that might help them overcome that?
Authors don't always realize they're running a business. All businesses must advertise. And that's the leap that I think is the biggest for authors, is that they don't realize they're running a business. No, I'm an author. I'm a creative person. I write words, I put them out, and there's this marketing thing that I hate doing, but I'm not a business, but they are. And all businesses need to advertise because you just can't possibly share your product with enough people unless you are paying to play. It's unfortunate that's where we're at. Back in 2010, it was a little bit different when there were fewer products, fewer things out there, but we need to advertise. And I think that authors need to make this leap that if you want to hit these certain goals, and every author has certain numbers in mind, whether or not they write them down, it's not necessarily going to happen from writing more books. It's not necessarily going to happen from doing more social media posts. It's going to happen from the dollars and cents. It's going to happen from conversion and profitability. And if you never advertise, you're never going to see what is the full potential of this book's book A or book B, because you might have spent all of your time and effort on book A and think it's the best thing ever, and you wrote book B just because you needed to put something else out there. And it's possible that book B has the potential of making $100,000 over the life of that book. But if you never get more eyeballs over to that book, and if you never commit to, I'm actually going to try to market this because I'm a business, then you're just never going to reach those numbers that you have in your head that you're hoping to achieve, because you have to do it, or it's just going to go as far as Amazon will let you. And that isn't always going to be very far with millions of books out there.
Yeah, there's too much competition. I see this a lot too, where there's almost like a pride in not running ads and selling only organically. And personally, I don't think there's any pride in that. If you have a good product and you believe in your product, you should want that to reach as many people as possible.
Yeah, I think some of it is this feeling that, okay, I bought a course, I spent this money on a course, that's money I chose to spend. But giving Amazon the same budget and saying, I'm going to spend $300 from Amazon, it feels to them like Amazon is taking that money. Like, I had a choice on buying this program that I'm going to learn from, but I don't have a choice on Amazon taking my money, so it doesn't feel good. And I think people need to get over that mental hurdle. It is, you are going to learn more from the several $100s you spend running ads than you might learn from that course that, frankly, how many times have you opened it? Probably not even that many. And so you just need to try putting things in the right box mentally, that advertising is a learning experience that will help you grow.
It's an investment, not only in the product, but in yourself as well. I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of challenges, you're about to start a new 5-day author ad profit challenge. Could you elaborate on this initiative and tell us who it might benefit the most from it?
Absolutely. So 5-day author ad profit challenge is something we've been running for 3 years. I think we're almost to 4 years. Every single quarter, we kind of decided, the usual framework is someone's out there selling something. They do a 40-minute webinar with some teaching, keep it kind of general to not give out the good tips. And then they say, buy this thing because it's gonna save your life. And we said, I don't know about that model anymore. What if, with something this detailed, something that you have to dive deeper into, what if we just said, we're going to give you everything you need to know to get started. We're going to give you 10 plus hours of content. We're going to give you all of this for free for this 2.5-week period so that everyone can kind of come together, do it in public, do it together. And it started growing, and we actually end up having about 4,000 to 5,000 authors who come in every challenge, and we teach them all at the same time, free support, free live Q&As, everything. And we have found that authors and we do have premium stuff that you can upsell to at the end, but even people who've never bought anything from us, we've had some folks say, I had my first $100 month. I had my first $1,000 month. I even know people who've never purchased anything from us who've hit $5,000 to $10,000 a month from their books, and they attribute it to walking through the ads during these 5-day challenges. And so we keep doing them. Amazon actually tends to share them on social
Very
media,
cool.
so it's like somewhat Amazon approved. And yeah, we really do love putting these events on.
Awesome. Well, finally, for our audience who are interested in joining the challenge or just learning more about your work, where should they look?
Well, I think the challenge is the best place to start. AuthorsAdvertise.com. If you go to AuthorsAdvertise.com, you can sign up for upcoming challenge. But if you catch this later, we try to do them every quarter. And the one coming up here is on July 19th is the start date, July 19th, 2023. I'm assuming this is going to last for 10 years, Cameron,
Okay.
so I have to put the year in there. But I'm really excited to meet new authors and to help new authors figure this out. Because if you try to do it, stumble through it on your own, and you haven't figured it, sometimes doing it in this tight challenge format with a lot of people helping out can be just the thing to get you to the next step.
Sounds perfect. I think I'm going to join myself just so I can learn more about the ins and outs of KDP advertising. Bryan, we really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights with us today, and your experience and advice, I'm sure, will provide our listeners with some invaluable knowledge to help them navigate the world of KDP advertising. As we wrap up here, do you have any final words or pieces of advice for our audience?
Absolutely. You can always get me talking, Cameron, but I appreciate you having me on once again. I will say that it starts by doing something. We can take all the courses, we can watch all the webinars, we can go hunting through YouTube for that secret magic red button that we think is going to take us to the next level. But when it comes down to it, doing things, taking action matters so much more than this passive absorption. So whether you take this challenge, whether you go find something, whether you read a book, do the homework, do the exercises, do the things rather than just trying to soak it in, because there is nothing better than consistent action when it comes to your success. Take consistent action. It's not consistent absorption, diffusion, whatever. You need to take that action. And if you do that on a regular basis, good things are going to happen.
I love it. Just stop overthinking it. Once again, thanks for joining us, Bryan. And to our listeners who are interested in Bryan's 5-day author ad profit challenge or would just like to learn more about your work, we'll check out the links that we're going to have in the descriptions. This has been a great conversation, and we really hope to have you back in the future. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, and hope you enjoyed this discussion, and we'll see you in the next video.